My grandmother bikes to work, the morning sun warming the parched earth. It is 1975 China, and she thinks of how to stretch a pound of meat, the 10,000 ways to divide sinew and tendon, how to feed a family on nothing where a river undulates like a dying song. My grandmother does not see the men beneath the groaning bridge that yawns across the waters, does not hear the sound of her bicycle falling to the ground, the scrape of pebbles clawing her skin, the dance of blood and flesh. She hears a scream, but she does not know if it is hers. Her dead mother's pearl-faced watch is ripped off her skin. 10 moon-shaped ridges emerge on her wrists, indentations made by dirt-crusted fingernails. Melting back into the shadows, the men leave my grandmother with a bruised body, with a nightmare of a mind. It is when she starts to take the pills does my grandfather worry. My grandmother grabs them in fistfuls, swallowing them like her neighbors swallow the words of the man who has sent them to this barren nothingness, to the fringes of anything that matters. Here, the dust rises in little clouds in the mornings. She gulps the white tablets and waits for artificial sleep, the only sleep the nightmares bow in silence to. On days when she turns over the bottle and shakes out nothing, she lies on her back, hands folded on her breasts, staring at the ceiling for hours, months. On a day where the sun hides behind clouds, my grandmother opens 2 new bottles and leaves them empty, finally shutting out the visions, the heavy blankets that suffocate her dreams. An ugly bridge, dirty flesh, the squeal of bicycle brakes, hungry children's eyes magnified in skeletal faces. She lays out her best clothes at the foot of the bed, setting on the dirt floor the beaded slippers that she has never worn. They are jade green and the first thing my grandfather sees when he comes home. He notices the 2 neat bottles standing like sentries. He feels the raised skin on my grandmother's wrist, runs for my mother. The sleeping and the dead weigh heaviest, yet the 2 undead lift my grandmother's limp form, nestling her inside the dirt-lined innards of a tired wheelbarrow, its wheels squeaking and handles rusted. From house to house they run, my grandfather clutching the wheelbarrow, flakes of metal mingling with sweat on his palms. He tastes blood and fear on his tongue, rinses his teeth with stomach acid. My mother is 17, the age I am now, and she calls to the neighbors, asking anyone, please, anyone, for help. The idling neighbors gape at the dozing woman in a wheelbarrow, at the man with fragile bones pushing her, at my mother as she calculates sums for an upcoming exam that will decide her fate. Finally, someone points them to a hospital where a flustered nurse takes the wheelbarrow to a corridor that no one speaks of. In a cheerless metal room, the doctors extract the sleep, bringing my grandmother back into the nightmare, into the life she does not want. Weeks later, my grandmother sees my mother, sucks in her cheeks and spits. The spit is sharp and hot against my mother's skin, and she turns her face to the yellowed floor. How could you let them do that to me? My grandmother screams, her knuckles bone white against the blue of the hospital bed. Every week, they run electricity through her veins, the doctors assuring her that pain is the only way you know you're living. But my grandmother has died in that wheelbarrow, left a piece of her happiness out to dry under the cruel summer sun. When she leaves the hospital a year later, she walks, shoulders hunched and on trembling legs, clasping my grandfather's hand as he leads her back to their mud-colored house. By then, my mother has passed her exams, and she tells my grandmother that she will leave soon for a place called Megua, for America. My grandmother does not understand. Fingers scuttle in her lap, crescendoing voices return, voices that come to retrieve her thoughts and wring them, dip them into darkness. My mother waits for my grandmother's lips to still, for my grandmother to lift her eyes from the bare spot on her wrist. The skin there is pale and translucent, fragile in the fading kitchen light. The first day she arrives in America, in a school where girls with sunlit hair splay themselves on lush lawns, my mother spreads out her map against the pavement, trying to read the tiny letters. That night, she uses her roommate's phone, listening for the static to reveal my grandmother's voice as it is carried by invisible waves across continents, across bottomless oceans. Ma, she breathes, but she does not know where to begin. Where does it start? At a hospital? At the door of a bitter neighbor? At the feet of a man who sees opportunity in the millions of starving, angry peasants? My mother hears my grandmother's tin voice on the phone, consumes the sound of her own loneliness. I miss you, my mother finally says. She does not know about the bridge or the watch or even the white, hot thrum of electricity as it surges through the veins. She does not know how to slice a pound of meat into 10,000 pieces or how to clean blood off a bruised body. My mother does not know that one day she will have a daughter who will hang on metal bleachers in rainstorms, laughing when the pain explodes up her arms. A daughter who will bike alone to feel the starlight, who will own 2 pearl-faced watches. This daughter will never have to touch a wheelbarrow or go to bed hungry. She will circle names of Chinese riverbanks with yellow highlighters that flow like blood. She will collect pebbles in a lacquer box, and she will giggle at the garbled notes that tumble out of her grandmother's mouth. But this daughter will also wonder. She will piece together the whispers that congeal at family reunions, when dark-haired relatives with double chins feast on mountains of meat, on gleaming dishes of fish and pork flesh. Over virgin rice and sauce-coated eggplant, they will steal glances at her grandmother. Don't you know what happened to her? They will ask each other over tall glasses of perspiring beer. And they will shake their heads because they cannot imagine. No one can.